الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا ونشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله وقال الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون يا أيها الذين آمنوا واتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا قولوا قولا سديدا صدق الله العظيم وصدق رسوله الكريم نحن على شاهدين وشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we glorify Him, we praise Him, and indeed we affirm that Him and Him alone is worthy of all worship and no one else is. And we ask that He send His and ours best of blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his family, his companions, and all those who will follow him until the end of time. Respected elders, dear brothers and sisters, this afternoon I feel privileged to return to this nascent community after its inception a little over than a year ago perhaps. And it humbles me to be with all of you. May Allah bless each one of you who contributed in whatever way in building this beautiful community, the Islamic Center of Santa Ana. May Allah bless the founders, their families, their children, those who are serving here as volunteers. And may Allah bless all of us to contribute in any which way that we can to further strengthen our commitment to our deen and also to serve our community for the sake of Allah and for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This afternoon I briefly, since this is a nascent community, I'd like to share some reflections on what are the, or what can be the essential components that helps a community grow stronger, deeper in its commitment and conviction, and how best can we cultivate this community to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the most optimal way. Some things are obvious and perhaps some are not. And I like to briefly share of these different aspects so that we can recommit ourselves to these essential components which are not only helpful and healthy for a stronger community but also helps in our family, in our collective lives as well. First and foremost, that is obvious, is Iman is the essential foundation of a community experience. Right? So without Iman, if we are doing all the good things that we, purely from a humanitarian perspective, though that has its meaning as well in a society, but void of Iman, void of belief in why we are doing what we are doing, perhaps is not as helpful, particularly for us, those who are believers in a certain value system. Our work, our thoughts, our actions are rooted in certain values and ethics and principles and a belief system. Void of that may or may not necessarily be most helpful for a community like Islamic Center or Santa Ana or any other community for that matter to grow deeper in its commitment to please and serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second, also is an obvious component that when in a community we transcend our own ethnicities and tribes and orientations and family lineage and class structures and so on, and come together as spiritual brothers and sisters of each other and toward each other, following the Quranic principle that innamal mu'minuna ikhwah, that all of those who believe in this particular system are by default our spiritual brothers and sisters, akin to biological relationship that we have. Now, it doesn't mean that brothers and sisters are always going to be happy and getting along and so on. No, there are those challenges, and we acknowledge and we recognize those and figure out a way to address them in a fashion that is respectful, meaningful, and thoughtful in alleviating those differences, and yet be able to work together for the common and the greater good of our community. Third is a community of shura, a community that consults with each other. When I say with each other, it includes men, women, children, those who come only on Fridays, those who come for Fajr, those who come only for Eid Salah, a community that consults with each other. And such consultation is rooted in the idea that no one person is capable or has the capacity of all wisdom. And that's why Quran commands us to conduct our affairs through mutual consultation. Shura amra bainahum. And that's a cardinal principle of any communal living. And a community now that this is blossoming, mashallah, and people coming from different places, praying here, enriching themselves spiritually, the leadership of this community, the volunteers of this community ought to live with that Quranic model of mutual consultation with each other. Fourthly, a community of wasat, a community that is balanced. That's not too, doesn't exaggerate it in its doings, whatever doing that it does, nor it's very extravagant in other matters. It's balanced in its discourse, it's balanced in its action, it's balanced in its thought, it's balanced in its mission, in a fashion that is appealing and inviting to people of all colors and orientations and thoughts, rather than any one particular orientation. And thus, it helps people to come together with a common purpose, and then be able to work together for the common and the greater good. Sixthly, a community of khair, a community that meets out nothing but goodness. Now sometimes we feel that that goodness only belongs to us. Also perhaps that has its place as well. There are certain times and certain situations where it is more imperative and important to have that goodness extended to each other. But generally speaking, that khair should also be spread outside these four walls. Santa Ana happens to be the capital of the county of Orange, of 36 different cities, the corporated cities. There are some incorporated cities also. Santa Ana also happens to be the poorest city in all of Orange County. So we as believers, we as Muslims, we as a community ought to also be sharing the goodness, whatever modest that we may have, with those who don't, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our city. Seventhly, a community of ta'awun, cooperating, collaborating with each other. There is a very beautiful Quranic injunction where we are commanded, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. It's followed by another injunction, وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. And the first portion of it commands us to cooperate and collaborate with each other. It doesn't say that collaborate only with people who speak your language, eat the food that you like, have the same culture, but universal cooperation and collaboration with each other, regardless of our own preferences. And because that cooperation and collaborative spirit cultivates a community that genuinely, authentically cares for each other, again for the common, larger, greater good. The subsequent, and also that cooperation and collaboration, also it doesn't say cooperate only with people who believe like you. It just says collaborate with each other, universal. Now conversely, the second portion of this injunction also reminds us, وَلَا تَعَوْنُ, do not cooperate also with those folks, and they will include those who believe like us. It's very beautiful to think about it, and I urge us to reflect on this. You can cooperate with those people who may not be believing like you, but yet for the common and the greater good, if it perpetuates virtue. And conversely, don't cooperate with each other if the outcome of their cooperation is vice, is wrong, is unhealthy, is harmful. And even if that cooperation is for people of their own tradition. So this is a very universal aspect that we are expected to follow and practice as best as possible for again the common and the greater good. That Islamic center of St. Anna becomes a hub of khayr, of ta'awun, of iman, of ukhuwah. These components are essential for a community to grow. And finally, the community of tanasub, a community that really cares, genuinely cares for others. I don't live in this city, but I do happen to drive around for different reasons. And I have seen some neighborhoods in this city that I never had imagined that they exist in the richest state of our nation, or the 8th largest or 6th largest, depending on who we look at, whose statistics we look at, the richest, 6th or 8th richest economy of the world. And then we see the abject poverty in this city, in this community. Now, many of us perhaps are also part of that. May Allah help us, bless us to overcome those economic challenges. But it is not just the material aspect of it that we can share, or we can express our care and concern toward those who may not have. Simple words, a genuine, authentic compassion and care toward those who are afflicted or oppressed in whatever fashion. And ninthly, a community that indeed also invites people to experience, to learn, to explore, to question, to challenge, to understand our value system. Many people in this nation considers our faith, our tradition, for everything that it is not. And that poses a greater responsibility upon us to share. In the terminology, we call it da'wah, invite people with words of wisdom and goodness to undo the myth and fallacies that exist perhaps in their hearts and minds. And that will not happen only by virtue of the leadership of this masjid doing it, or 2 people are doing it, but rather all of us collectively in our own ways. And sometimes this also has taken a shape of inviting people for the sake of conversion. Conversion or reversion is up to Allah. whoever He wishes to change their hearts. It's not in our neither control nor our purview. All we can do is share the beautiful message of Prophet ﷺ, which is very, very simple. That there is only one Creator worthy of all worship, and there is only one Creator who created all of us. Those who believe, those who don't, those who are white or black or red or blue or green, poor, powerless, doesn't matter. All of us are created by this one God. That's the simple message. And we ought to share this message with those who will live. And lastly, certainly a community of peace. A community that is nothing but offers peace and lives in peace and lives with peace. These are the essential components, and each of us in our own individual lives, in our collective lives, and also in our communal life, in this institution, in this community perhaps, will be helpful if we were to practice as best as possible in our own ways. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq, to be able to not only ritually practicing our deen, but also as best as possible with all of our weaknesses and shortcomings. Try also to inculcate those values that Prophet ﷺ teaches us to practice. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين. Bismillah ar-rahman ar-raheem. Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. I close with this beautiful prophetic wisdom and teaching for us reported in Sahih Muslim. And it also advises us or offers us this beautiful words of wisdom which complements what I have just shared earlier. Prophet ﷺ offers us these 9 words of wisdom, or 9 advices in one of these. 1. Do not be jealous of each other. Jealousy can be for a variety of reasons. Prophet ﷺ teaches us, don't be jealous of each other. Do not be deceptive toward each other. Again, these are the simple perhaps, but very profound in its meaning and value. Don't hate each other. Converse perhaps is implied, love each other in other words. Be honest with each other. Don't boycott each other. We may disagree sometimes, or a lot, or a less, but don't boycott. I don't like this brother, I'm never going to talk to him. No boycott. We still continue our relationship in that spiritual brotherhood that we discussed. Don't undermine each other. As the modern language goes, they don't pull their feet or their legs. If somebody is growing, doing better things, achieving, accomplishing things, may Allah bless, pray. Celebrate that rather than undermining them. And then Prophet ﷺ also teaches, do not do wrong to your brother or sister. Intentionally, in other words, that I mean ill will toward a fellow Muslim, or for that matter for anyone, but in this particular respect, advice for Muslims toward Muslims. Don't leave your brother or sister wronged. In other words, stand up when they are wronged in solidarity for the oppression that they are subjected to by whoever. Sometimes your own brother or sister. The principle is to stand up against injustice and wrong. And lastly, don't lie and don't despise each other. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to be able to cultivate these simple but very profound, very meaningful values in our hearts, in our minds, in our actions, in our lives. You know, habits are cultivated by doing little things over a long period of time, rather than abruptly, dramatically, radically changing overnight. Sometimes that works also. You know, we always remind ourselves with prophetic saying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those acts that are consistent, long term, however small they may be, however modest they may be. Sharing $1 every Friday in this masjid perhaps is better than contributing $100 one Friday and then not contributing anything for next 25 Fridays. So consistency cultivates habits, habits become norm, and norm becomes natural, and then we begin to do things naturally, and it becomes much easier for us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us, to bless us, to allow us to think, tafakkur, to think, tadabbur, to reflect, to ponder on these virtues and values that we are blessed to have received as the most beautiful gifts by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give the best of health to those who are sick and ill in our community. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to be able to be a source of joy and relief and comfort toward our own family, toward those who may live around and those who are in this part of the city. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to unite our hearts, our ranks, and always help us to be mindful of the common and the greater good. Ya Allah, we ask those who passed away before us to forgive their sins and mistakes and shortcomings and give them the best place in Jannat al-Firdaus. And we ask that, Ya Allah, give us the tawfiq to also die, meet you in our second eternal life in the state of Iman. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless those brothers and sisters who continue to serve for the pleasure of Allah in this masjid and other masajid throughout Southern California. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم اغفر لي ولوالدينا وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وأقيموا الصلاة.